I focus a lot on mixing over here, but I want to give a tip about recording that really helps if you're recording, producing for yourself or your own band or other people or whatever you're doing. This is extremely helpful. It's an old school way of working, but it works really well in the modern day with the DAW. Basically, this is the point. You record for whatever the first stretch is. With a lot of guys, it's how many people you can get in a room to play together to make it all one cohesive thing. And that could be bass drums and guitar. Let's just say, for example, I recommend more than one thing at once because that will also inform your decision making. It's very hard to pick the best drum performance when it's all done to a click, 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 click. I mean, really hard to know what has the best feel and groove when you're not putting it against anything else. It's just by itself. So if you can at least get bass and drums at the same time, or keyboards and drums, or guitar and drum, whatever you can get all together at once, that's your first stretch, I call it. So day one, you hit record. Now you got a bunch of people playing. You do 3-4 takes. The move before you start doing anything after those 3-4 takes is get everybody in the control room, sit around the computer, and pick unanimously what you guys think is the best performance. So that means we need to, based on feel, based on groove, and mainly focus on the things you're not going to be doing again. For example, if you've got bass, drums, and guitars, maybe you're going to layer guitars, pan them around, do more, ambient stuff. You're going to add all sorts of stuff. So maybe the guitars, take it or leave it. But the point is, what do we feel the best on? Where's the groove here? What makes us feel something? That take usually jumps out at you. Sometimes you got to choose between two, so you narrow it down, then you pick one. After that just put that together in the best way you can. And this is the theme of this video, basically, is get a rough balance every time you record anything. Make basically a new mix every time you record groups of things. So if you picked your take, put that together. Faders, where can I get this to just sort of sit nicely? Maybe panning or whatever, if you got a couple guitars or whatever it is, get it sitting. Okay, good. Now we can hear this objectively and say, this should have more here. This needs whatever. Okay, so without that, you're really flying blind. So now let's say you record a couple more things, maybe other guitars, some keyboards, whatever. The day has now come to almost an end. At that point, I would make another mix. And a lot of times, if you're doing guitars and then keyboards, do the guitars, now put those together before you have the keyboards come in and do whatever they're going to do. Because everything you do, you must add it to the project before you record a bunch of blob and then try to make it work later. That's the worst thing I think people do who didn't go old school. Because the old school method, because a console would always have to get zeroed out and you weren't sharing, you're basically sharing the console all the time with other people, because not a lot of people could afford to just block out days and days and days and days in a studio. So a lot of times it's like a couple, half day here, day here, whatever it was. But the point is, engineers would mix what they got at the start of every session and at the end of it to know what they had. So that means if you then add a couple other things and you put that mix together, now you have something you can compare, right? You can compare that thing with all this stuff added to where you were when you had a lot less. And a lot of times what people will realize is, ooh, we lost something here. What did we change in either the balance or the panning, or what did we change with EQ? Why did the drums get worse? Why did the bass get worse? What has happened to destroy what we did between version 5 and 3? That's what will wind up happening. Your ability to move between what you've done, and you're basically taking a snapshot of it every time you start and every time you end a session. But I'm also recommending every time you add a bunch of stuff, like a group of things. You add a bunch of guitars. All right, well, now let's get a balance of what we've done. Until you do that, I literally do this probably everything I record. If I do a bunch of rhythms, I want to hear what it's like after the rhythms are done before I add the leads. Because sometimes you'll realize we don't really need the leads we thought here. It's already very busy. Why would we mess with that? You start thinking along the arrangement lines once you can really hear what's going on. A lot of the people who just record things, you're just flying so blind. You're making it very hard for yourself to, at the end, be dealing with anything other than a wedding soup with just blob all over, just tons of stuff, mishmash. Now, how do we put it all together? It's like, it's not really the way you're supposed to do this. You could also use this whole concept in a mixing sense, because what I do when I'm mixing is I take these snapshots. Basically, I print a mix every, let's say, 2 hours. And so you could do it every hour and a half. But this is the point. As you move through things, what we're doing is such a chemical cocktail of things interacting that you'll change one little thing, and now all of a sudden the bread don't rise in the oven. So you change a little bit of fader here, a little bit of compression here, a little EQ, whatever you're messing with. It helps to know what it was like a version before. So every hour and a half to 2 hours, I'll make another mix just so I know in my head when I flip through them, because I just import all the mixes into the same session, and I can see, oh, I had it here. About 4 hours in, I was there. 6 hours in, I lost it. What's the difference? You can compare. You can then decide logistically what you should fly into which session in order to get back to where you were. Sometimes it's easy to, go back to the old session, but depending on how much other stuff you've added, it might just be easier to move stuff from the old session into the new one. That's logistics, and it's just as easy as file, import session data, you're good to go. Having those snapshots has saved me multiple times, because you got to realize the human element within what we do. We get numb to what's going on, and that becomes the norm. Just like we could be miserable and then we get comfortable being miserable and we think that's our whole life. The same thing happens with a mix. You make it worse, and then you just think that's how it always sounded. You forget how great it was way back when. So having those snapshots, really helpful, because nothing like that to really pinpoint what's wrong or what's right. Also, I recommend don't just listen on your monitors. Like if you have mains, that's great. But like that secondary speaker, like a Bluetooth speaker or something, it helps to check this other mix like on more than one thing. Even if you've got the best monitors in the world, throw it into something else. Because a lot of times on our own devices that show us everything, they give us all the information like our great monitors. They're actually great, and really what you need, a good tool to mix that will show you everything. Depth of field, the spatial perception, how really just be able to pinpoint things, hear everything. But if you all of a sudden then change to something that doesn't sound good, you'll focus on something totally different. You have to. It's just part of that. You can't focus on the same things. And just that is a mental reset that will wake you up to problems. And what I'm saying is people do that in mixing all the time, really. It's a big thing. But a lot of people, when you're producing, they don't have a tendency to do that. And I think they should. And they'd be more willing to if they got in this habit of literally putting it together, whatever they just recorded, and making a mix at that point, and then doing the check with that. Because you have to sort of move around. When people produce, a lot of times they only do it on one set of speakers because they want to feel great about it. So they put it on the best set of speakers they have. But it really helps to do this process of other set of speakers also. It helps because it will show you something else. You're not really going for, does what we're doing translate to speakers? You're not really going for that. It's more like, what will this other thing tell me? What new information can I get now that my head has been, spun around and I'm listening on other speakers? It's really helpful, especially a speaker that's not good. So in my opinion, this concept, do a mix at the beginning of every session, even if you have the one saved from the night before. Like let's say you recorded a bunch of stuff with your band or yourself or whatever. You make your mix at the end of the night. The next day, the critical part here is start from zero. You could always go back to the mix from last night, but give yourself a chance to hear it differently before you hear it at all. So you open up the session that new day, pull everything down to zero before you hit play. Pull everything down, and sometimes take off all the plugins too. Anything you may have put on there, and literally start from scratch. And this will do a lot of things. It will get you quicker at dialing things in to make it great. But then all of a sudden, you have a whole new perspective and a fresh night's sleep. Your brain is not exactly the way it was yesterday. You'd be surprised how many things you wind up doing different. And then you'll have a fresh comparison. You could always go back to the other version. So why not give yourself the chance to do it with a fresh head? And how would you do it? And now that early day mix, you're going to make another one when you're done at the end of the day with everything you've recorded. This is just if you're on the producing end, you're literally going to make another mix at the end of the day anyway. And then if there's another day coming up where you're working on it again, do the same thing again. Start from zero, make another one. What's going to happen? Worst case, you got a bunch of mixes in the session, 6, 8, that you can flip between, but at least you'll know where you're at. It's so helpful. A lot of people just start where they left off. And in doing that, you're inheriting the problems that you may have created that weren't there before one thing got changed. It could be as little as one thing. So I found this extremely helpful, and it's an old school way of working because they would make a mix at the end of the day so that they could always know this is where we were and maybe this mix will work. And they would compare it against other things and sometimes wind up using the mix they made several mixes back, even if it had less gear, no Fairchild. Like, I mean, a lot of studios, you use what you got, which is also why limitations are great. So I also stress the concept of really getting to know your tools, your plugins or whatever, as if it was gear. Like, use the same stuff a lot until you get bored of it and you have to switch, because that happens too. But the point is, if you use the same stuff a lot, it's not a question of which plugin, which EQ is going to sound the best on this. It's really like, just throw one on so I can start working, because that's the other thing. That mix in the beginning of the day should be quick. Don't make it take 8 hours. It's got to be quick. You need to get good at doing a quick put together of what you're doing, because that'll make you better too. So you wind up taking one song and really getting the most out of it in terms of your growth, your learning potential, and you're not flying blind. You're guiding yourself based on what you've already recorded. It's informing your next decision, which is how you absolutely should work. I don't know how anybody does it any other way, but I also know I used to do it the other way. I used to just record every idea I had, then try to put it together. So we're all in the same boat. We've all started there at some point, but the limitations of the past can absolutely help you today in this kind of a method. So leave a comment, hit the like button. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.